Some may think the same old answers will be given. They take more risks and pay less attention to detail. What happens when the new generation dismisses experience? The surreal truth about the essential human element. A necessary discussion on leaders in tech with guest Adrian Smith.
But actually, you needed people to be working in their office, which is an operating theatre. You needed them in their office, which is the cab of a vehicle. You needed them in a warehouse, which is their office. Because if they didn't do any of that, nothing happened. So we've still got a long way to go in terms of society, in terms of working out how this is going to work in the future, what can be computerized and automated, and what should be and shouldn't be. And with the global nature of economies and the competitiveness of these different areas, it's going to be a very difficult discussion.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Tech, where we're interviewing amazing technology leaders that are changing this world for a better place. Today we have with us a person that I recently met, but he's quickly becoming a very good friend. Adrian Smith, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David, and good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening. Yeah. Where I am at the moment is in the United Kingdom, so it's just ending up with dinner time, tea time. So
that's wonderful. Adrian, actually, I was going to ask you. You are. Tell me your full name. Where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Okay, so my full name is Adrian Smith. There's a little bit in the middle, but we don't worry about that. I work for a company called Adsatis, which is based in the City of London in the United Kingdom. And I live about 1 hour's drive southwest of London. So I work from home some of the time, and I work from the centre of London some of the time. As you probably appreciate, or many of your viewers will appreciate, Europe is quite small. United Kingdom is quite tiny. And so I've got things on my doorstep, France and Spain and Germany and the Netherlands. And I do travel to those places quite a lot, mainly for pleasure these days, but I used to travel a lot to those places on business. And I'm the CIO with Adsatis, which is a management consultancy that's coming up for 35 years old. It's not a bad achievement for a relatively small company.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
It's amazing, 35 years old, just being in business that much. It tells a great deal of how well your company has been able to adapt to technologies, to changes. When you do a management consulting company, can you be a little bit more specific? What specifically do you guys do?
Well, what I need to be clear about is I've only been working with the team there for just over 10 years. And I'm one of the new people, but we're all very experienced. And I work for another management consultancy from about 35 years ago, doing something not so dissimilar as Adsatis. What Adsatis does, City of London, just for your viewers, to be absolutely clear, the City of London is a district in London. It's the financial services district of London. What's unique about it is it has its own mayor, it has its own police force, and some local laws which only apply to the City of London. It's quite strange. There's not a line on the road that you have to cross. You don't need a passport or anything like that. But it is actually an autonomous sector of London. Within that square mile, the famous square mile, are representatives of most of the banks and financial institutions from around the world. With a new square mile to the east in the Docklands area that was built since the mid-80s. And those two squares are where it all happens. And so Adsatis provides consultants and expertise to our clients that reside and do business principally from those two locations. We also do work for our clients in their own countries, whether it's Germany, United States, Canada. But the work we do is we have consultants who are experts in specific areas of finance, financial services, perhaps payment systems, Forex systems, back office, front office systems, both commercial banking and retail banking. We have relatively few of us are technology focused. I'm one of the few in the team that is based around technology. But our consultants often drive transformation, which of course is underpinned by changes in technology. And the other thing I said at the very beginning really is we're all very experienced. So with experience comes age. So we're a cohort of quite the elderly. we've been through a big bang, we've been through a crash, we've been through another growth, we've been through another crash. So we've all seen quite a bit of the last 20 or 30 years.
Adrian, one of the reasons why the Wars of Wellness is so successful, at least up to now, in the financial world, in the business world, is because we actually own our experience. We actually, when we see people with a sustainable amount of years worth, we actually value that a lot. And I tell you this because if you go to developing countries, as soon as they hit 40, 45, they don't want to hire people anymore. And it's a shame because that's where you're actually starting to mature enough to make sound decisions without having a lot of emotions, right?
It is quite, it can be quite tough sometimes. And I've got children who've grown up and left home. And in fact, I have grandchildren now quite recently. All my children are, they did well at school, they did well at college, did well at university, they have good careers ahead of them. But it's quite noticeable how different they see the future of the world from the way that I saw the future of the world at their age. It is very different. And then between them in their early 30s and me, there's a cohort of people who either don't want the value of somebody's experience because they think it would undermine their own position, perhaps, or they think that the same old answers will be given. I think there's that comes out quite a lot when I meet with people at dinners and conferences and just in the coffee shop. Quite often I can hear other people talking about how this new scheme, this new piece of software, this new approach is going to change the world. And yet what I'm actually hearing is it's pretty much the same old song. The beat is slightly different, but people seem to take far more risks these days and they pay less attention to detail. I think maybe that's not wrong. I mean, I think that is actually a statement of what's going on. They take more risks, less attention to detail, and then they buy their way out of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is demonstrated actually by a lot of the software that we use these days. Why every Tuesday, Patch Tuesday, I'll use as an example, are we fixing hundreds of bugs? Security bugs, features that don't work properly. How is it that every single week we have this? Why can't we build something reliable and stable anymore? That if we were 30 years ago, you and I having this meeting, and we were talking about patches being done every Tuesday, and there would be a patch list of maybe 100 features that were changed or been compromised. And that's just with one manufacturer that pretty much runs the world's IT, or one of 3 or 4 that run it. We'd be saying there's no way we'd be building and letting systems be released with so many problems. Surely not. But to me, it just tells me how vulnerable we have become, or potentially vulnerable we have become to some of these platforms going wrong.
Well, think about it. Microsoft had a hiccup last year, and it caused the entire airfield to be stuck for a while. Most places in the United States got grounded because there was a bug in the system or a hack, right?
I think it certainly affected Microsoft systems. I don't think they were entirely responsible for it.
No, I'm not saying they were responsible for it, but talking about the vulnerability that we're developing by doing this type of practices, right?
Yeah, I mean they were a single point of failure, whether they caused the problem or not, for so many organizations. And that was a frightening situation to wake up that morning. And then I had to wonder whether we were going to be affected by that. And I realized quite quickly we weren't. But then I had to look at our supply chain and say, well, is there another protagonist, another part of the supply chain? It's conceivably in the same position of strength and ultimately could be in the same position of weakness for us. So we had to rejig and think of a few things about our contingency planning, etc. And to be honest, we're okay. And I think most of our clients were okay. But it's interesting. You mentioned airlines or airports. These are organizations, particularly airlines, who they're supposed to have very robust systems. Now, of course,
that's what the most robust in the world.
Yes,
a billion people in the air, right?
Yeah. And I'm not aware that anybody lost their life as a result of the issue. We won't mention the companies involved, but I know that it costs airlines a lot of money having to put people in hotels and reschedule things. But it did show that for an organization, for a market sector where those organizations were highly vulnerable. We had a situation in the UK last weekend, in fact, so not yesterday, but the weekend before, where one of our major banks, a bank that incidentally processes 40% of our debit card and credit card transactions within the country, payments, 40%. Well, that's what they claim. I do know that they have something like 25 million account holders, and I happen to bank with them as well, as does my wife. And on the Friday, just over a week ago, their systems had a problem, and it's still not been explained what the exact nature of that problem was. But it meant, for example, that my wife couldn't make any payments after about 10 a.m. in the morning until sometime on Sunday evening. She couldn't do any transactions. She couldn't gain access to her online banking through the app, through the web. I could do more than she could, but for no apparent reason why I could do it and she couldn't. We couldn't transfer money between each other, which is a bit frustrating as well. She keeps reminding me how much I owe her, you see. And the point was, loads and loads of people were affected because it was the last working day of the month. So their salaries were not coming through to the account. They couldn't make their payments. And this took, for some people, 3 days to resolve itself. Now, how that bank got into that situation, we don't know. It's not been explained. One of the ways that they dealt with it was to turn off their chat, their web chat, and their telephone answering system, because they knew they'd be inundated with calls and messages from their clients. And they got the view that actually we need to turn off our exposure to our clients and just feed them a particular news. In fact, the news channels were doing the work for them, explaining. Because had they been responding to millions and millions potentially of customers over the phone, using web chat, etc., it had got even worse for them. And this brings me back to my experience in IT. Historically, when we've had problems, is one of the things you want is a team of people looking at a problem without having the board, major shareholders, big customers, constantly asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? That kind of thing. And so we were quite vulnerable in the banking sector 2 weeks ago in the UK. It's not the first time, but it's rare, probably 3 or 4 times like that in 15 years. But if you looked at social media and you looked at the news, people really, really felt vulnerable.
Oh yeah, so Adrian, like we're living in a different world. Like when I mentioned about the airlines and the crash that we had last year, by no means I'm talking bad about any company at all. Like I don't even know what happened or how Microsoft got involved. What I'm saying is, you just sparked a great point. How come we're doing patches every Tuesday? And like these we're talking like $1 trillion valuing companies. So I think what happened is, number one, we have a global economy. We have great connectivity. Technologies are busting faster than we can catch up with. And I'm telling you, like I have a software consulting company too, but mine is just purely IP development, right? We just create new software for our clients and digital transformation systems. But even us, that we have a research team, we have to be on the bleeding edge before we actually give leading edge to our clients. So we need to understand and decipher whether it's going to be good or bad for our clients to use the new technology. And we're having a hard time keeping up, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, you got to realize that also the world, unfortunately, is full with thieves and people that want to take advantage of technology. So as we advance the technology, the bad guys also uses the same technology to start hacking and trying to hijack our systems and demand money. Last week, for example, one of our clients got hacked. And thank God we have, for us, security is number one. So we have many layers of security when we write our code. So they were able to get into the code that faces the website. So they were able to inject JavaScript and HTML in order to kind of fake that it was hacked, but it wasn't really hacked. But it was enough to scare our clients and create denial of service. We recorded within 5 minutes. We're not like, at this point on age, if you don't have somebody or a team dedicated to making sure all these things are not happening, people will go down. And Adrian, the problem is that the higher, like for example, in this case, it was an education system, very thousands and thousands of users, but very encapsulated. Like nothing will happen, right? Like, it was a scheduling system for a school activity. Like nothing will really happen. It was just a minor inconvenience. Thank God nothing happened on the data side, so there was no data loss or anything else, because this is what we put the most security on. But we live in a hyper-connected world. So when you see that the airports are shutting down airlines because they have no software running, this could actually make a domino effect that could affect the world. To give an example, right? Not only on technology, but the 2008 crisis. It was a global catastrophe. It wasn't only the United States and the UK. It was like it affected the entire world.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We've all experienced that over the last 5 years ago. In fact, in March this year, it will be the 5th anniversary of the COVID lockdowns in the United Kingdom, which was March 2020, and plus or minus a month in other countries, and to varying degrees of lockdown. A situation that in the UK, I can tell you, was quite surreal. I had to travel. I was allowed to travel because I had a business and I could visit my office, and I was also allowed to travel because I had my mother-in-law was very ill and elderly and had to stay at home. And driving on empty roads was unusual. Not seeing anybody was unusual. Having to spend time talking to more people and not meeting them, and standing 3 meters apart and all of that was really, really strange. Almost nothing broke down. Systems continued to work. Food was still produced and delivered. But while all the technical things in society worked, those other things, the emotional relationships that we're used to having, were strained in a very different way. And I think the repercussions of that, certainly in the UK, are only really being analysed and felt now. The effect it had on children's education, for example, the effect it had on younger people starting their careers, going into an environment that was totally unusual, unexpected, and working at a distance, not having that face-to-face thing. And I suspect to varying degrees, we had the same problems around the world. I know that in the UK and in the US, if you look at LinkedIn and you look at the discussions, a day doesn't go by without somebody moaning and groaning about having to return to the office and why it's so much better to work from home. They almost want to press that X on the top left, the top right, and say, I'm not interested in this discussion. There's a small sector of people like myself who've worked in a hybrid environment for decades. And then suddenly we have a huge number of people who were office desk bound, working from home, who now don't want to go back to their offices. And I totally understand why they don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they are still a relatively small number of people in the overall population of employed people. We can't have doctors working from home. We can't have surgeons working from home. We can't have police officers working from home. They need to be out at the coalface doing their jobs. And so when I see people on LinkedIn bleating about having to return to the office and how wrong it is and how they're going to change their job and all this sort of thing. I think, well, yeah, but if everybody worked from home, our society really would collapse. So one of the things that COVID taught me, and it wasn't about COVID particularly, it was about the fact we had lockdowns, taught me was that there is a huge number of people that have to physically go and do something to make the world go round. And you can't computerize that bit. Currently, you can't computerize the lorry driving from the factory to the warehouse, and you can't computerize the van coming from the warehouse to my front door. That still requires a human to deliver things, to hand bags over the doorstep.
For now.
For now, yeah. You still required a surgeon and a surgical team to be in an operating theatre saving somebody's life. You couldn't say, "Oh, well, we'll just we won't do it," or we'll have one person on Teams doing the anaesthetic remotely, and we'll have another person on Teams telling you which scalpel to use, and then we'll actually just have a surgeon in the middle just doing all the stuff because we can't have people working closely together, etc. But actually, you needed people to be working in their office, which is an operating theatre. You needed them in their office, which is the cab of a vehicle. You needed them in a warehouse, which is their office. Because if they didn't do any of that, nothing happened. So we've still got a long way to go in terms of society, in terms of working out how this is going to work in the future, what can be computerized and automated, and what should be and shouldn't be. And with the global nature of economies and the competitiveness of these different areas, it's going to be a very difficult discussion.
Adrian, we're talking about vulnerabilities and how the world changed and how sensible we are, right? We talked about the hyperconnectivity that could cause a calamity. We talked about the hyper-financial connectivity that actually have negative global impact before. Now you're talking about something completely different, and this also the speed in which we can actually interact with each other, not only remotely, but also by the means of transportation that we have in our modern society. And what am I telling you this? So I'm a man of faith, so I'm a born-again Christian, and finally, after over 53 years, I decided to read my Bible. Because I was one of those guys that went to church once a year and never read the Bible, right? So after reading the entire scripture, I went to the book of Daniel, which is a prophetic book, and it has a lot to do with what we're talking about, because this is not a religious channel, this is a technology channel. But in that book, it says that in the last days, people will actually go back and forth exponentially, and the knowledge and technology will increase exponentially. Why am I saying these things? Well, just jump back 120 years ago, 125 years ago. If there was an outbreak of something, most likely will get localized, and it will maybe take 2 or 3 months for somebody to go on a ship and infect another continent. COVID happened in December, I think, in China or wherever it was released, and by March, the entire world was infected. Why? Because 4 billion, last year, 4 billion people traveled through a plane that goes 700 miles an hour.
Yeah.
4 billion people.
Yeah, it's. I mean, when you put it like that, it's quite astounding, isn't it? The speed at which anything can move. I mean, we're moving data around, of course, in sub-seconds, but the knock-on effect of a physical movement of a virus or a bacteria or whatever it happens to be is quite astounding now. And as you say, 125 years ago, we didn't have planes. Ships would take weeks to get to their destination. And if it was something particularly bad and particularly contagious, then perhaps most of the people that caught it would have died and been given a burial overboard before they reached the destination port. The destination port would then have a boat with a cohort of people that were resistant to the illness. And, you can imagine how that would work. They would be stronger as a result of not dying. Then this is where you have to balance your theology with Darwin and to actually try and work out how you square those things up. But people survive and they become stronger and less susceptible to something. And you don't really have that opportunity these days when you're sitting with 200 other people on a plane. You all get out at the same point, you all queue at the same point, and so on. You're all speaking and coughing, and I'm very, I'm not sure what the solution to these things. I mean, we could presumably ban. I mean, you'd think actually with all of the use of Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, all of these platforms which have become de facto platforms for you to communicate with these days, and FaceTime and all of that. Why are people still flying to meetings? Why is there, why is that possible? Why is that even needed anymore? But yet we're still doing it.
It's the same reason why we're actually making people go back to the office. We happen to be social beings.
Yeah.
And Adrian, I'm like you. When I started my business, I will commute about an hour and a half each way to my office. And I did that for over 10 years. And the hour and a half became almost 2 hours by the end. So I was desperate. But guess what? I went to an office with actual people, and I actually had lunch, and we went out for beers once in a while on Fridays, and we celebrated birthdays. And I was talking a cubicle, doing whatever it is that I was doing as a technology leader. But we had real meetings face to face, where you can actually, we are social beings. What's happening now is that we are creating this artificial way to communicate with each other, which is wonderful, but you tend to get stuck in an office. Like, for example, for me, the only reason, so for 2 reasons why I started my own consulting company. Number one, I knew I could do more with my time. And so I had, I was bounded in a great part by my superiors on my timing. So I knew I could be more efficient if I could manage my own time. I could add more value. But number two, because I was a technologist, I knew that I should be able to do my work wherever in the world I was, as long as the work was done on time and under budget. And also I knew that I didn't have to be restricted by hiring people from the city that I lived in. If we have the internet, and I could hire, beautiful, amazing people in London, England, or, in South Africa or in South America. So those were my 2 hypotheses. This is 2005, right? So imagine the internet was 1 megabit connection. We already had systems like this. We could actually do it. I actually did it. So I started my office hybrid. I had people in Central America, people in the States. I was in Canada, but I always had an office. I always had people. I always had a head office, because I grew up in the corporate world, and I got used to actually interacting with people. And that was something that I did it on purpose, because I didn't want to lose that. Now let's move forward, 20 years later, and I had to give up my office last year because 2 people were going to the office every day. 2 people. And I was, I had this huge real estate wasted. I was traveling half the world anyway. So I'm like, why am I paying all this? I never forced any, that's one thing that I always did, right? As an entrepreneur, I knew that if you give autonomy to your employees, that's how you foster culture, because you give them authority, but they get also responsibility. So I told them, you want to work from home. You want to work at the office? There is an office, go there. But when I saw that only 2 people were showing up in average, I'm like, I'm not stupid either. I'm going to close down this thing and save thousands and thousands of dollars a month, right? But the result is now I am isolated. The result is I'm stuck in an office for ages on end, and I'm like, I need to go and socialize,
Yeah, no, it's important. I think one of the things that we'll have is a group of a younger cohort moving through that were isolated at school during COVID, being taught from home, and then they've gone into the workplace expecting to have a different kind of social interaction, which they didn't learn in upper school, etc. Perhaps, and it will change things, but probably not necessarily for the better. You've still got a group of people that are going into jobs where you just have to turn up for work at the desk or the cab of the truck or the checkout or the operating theatre. I mean, there's no way around it. But people like you and I, where we've got clients, I mean, in our case, the Adsatis consultants, should be with the client. So they're either going to be in the client's office where the client will provide them with a desk and a chair, or they work remotely as if they were an employee of that. We don't have, 50 empty desks every day. We never built a model like that. In any event, had we built that model, I'm pretty certain by now we'd have done a downsizing of the real estate to underpin that. We've not had to do that because we never really had it. But I know lots of other companies that do something similar, and lots of other companies with back offices have had a real struggle to figure out what to do with that very expensive real estate, those very expensive desks, chairs, workstations, because quite a lot of those workstations were desktop-based equipment, and they had to go and buy a load of laptop-based equipment for the home use. So they're ending up running 2 fleets of assets. So there has to be something has to sort itself out. I always liked the idea, though, I'd always have my own desk and I could put my stuff on the desk.
Right.
I mean, you probably remember Seinfeld, the comedy.
Yes.
And I remember Jerry Seinfeld did one of his stand-up bits was about the fact that people had a desk in their office and they had the photograph of their own family, and it would face them. And he would say, well, why do you go to your office just to look at your family all day? Surely that one of the things you want to do is to get to the office to get away from, to some extent, looking at a picture of your mother-in-law. Do the mother-in-law joke. But and I think that's one of the things. I liked the idea of a desk where I could put my things out, a few ornaments, and nobody else would sit there. Now, with the hot desking philosophy in some organizations, you know that the next day it's been cleaned. Any personal things are in a little pedestal that's been wheeled around, and you have to put them out. Your paperweight, your photographs. I haven't really had to hot desk very much in my life, so I don't know quite what it's like for some people. But one of my children actually has to do this hot desking thing with removable pedestal, and then just, the earlier she gets to the office, the better the desk is with the better view out the window. If she gets there late, well, then she'll be stuck somewhere she doesn't want to be. But it's a bit strange, isn't it? Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is what the future will hold, because it will only require another crisis like that. God forbid, another pandemic.
Yeah.
And everybody's back to working from home. And the isolation, I have 2 grandkids. Those years, Canada was very severe. By law, we had to stay home for almost 2 years. And it was devastating to children. My kids, one of them was in junior high, the other one was in primary school. And that it was devastating in their life. Like having to go back to a school environment where they had to interact with other kids was very hard for them. Right?
Yeah, I hope we don't have something like that again. I feel if we did, there would be a bigger group of people that would be complacent about it, because there was a lot of mistrust of governments, a lot of conspiracy theories. It's almost as if COVID wasn't bad enough. It obviously it affected a lot of people, sadly, but it wasn't like something that happened just after the First World War in 1919, what was called the Spanish flu in Europe, which killed millions and millions of people in a relatively small area. In that sense, I think a lot of people would, if we had COVID version 2, unless it was a lot worse in terms of its mortality, I think people would just ignore it. And then it would have become worse.
Well, I think, what are the statistics? I think it was like, this last pandemic was like 1% of the Spanish flu, right? Or something like ridiculous like that, right? It was very little in comparison to the Spanish flu.
Yeah, very little, yeah. And in fact, if you look at the average, because at the beginning of the pandemic in the UK, we had very good statistics. If you believe the statistical data, we have very good stuff, and our sort of government poured the stuff out. And so they do a 5-year moving average. Every Wednesday you can download this information, and it splits the deaths the previous week by age, gender, and to some extent what the cause of death was. And if you looked at the 5-year moving average up to 2020, in the UK, we knew how many of each age group were going to die. And I suppose people doing insurance policies would use that data to decide what the risk was. But in the early stages of the pandemic, there was an uptick in people dying as a result of COVID-19. Fair enough. But when you get to 2022, 2023, 2024, the excess number of deaths is beginning to flatten out over that 5-year moving average, to the point now where the excess number of deaths in the UK is quite astounding. It's like a 10% increase over the historic increase. But it's not due to COVID. And this is what the discussion has been, I think, in a number of countries. I think in Canada, I think the data there's the same. I think in places like the Netherlands, the data is the same, where there's an increase in unexplained deaths or excess deaths that's not explained by catching COVID. So something else happened that maybe has affected it. Maybe people didn't get enough contact with other people to build up their immunity. Maybe people stopped getting out in the sun as much and didn't get as much of whatever the vitamins are that you absorb. And maybe people just got scared or depressed and generated a problem for themselves, or it generated itself and has weakened them. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. But there'll be people a lot younger than us spending the next 20 or 30 years analyzing all of that data, trying to figure out what to do next time. And then they'll put their plans, and then something will come along and they'll be blindsided. There'll still be Patch Tuesday, and it will be another maybe 200 fixes every Tuesday.
Another thing that I find astonishing with technology is, like, by now with the amount of connectivity that we have, you would have thought that it would be a very united world. Far from that. The polarization is horrible. I never seen the polarities in different types of political views, or everything. Every single aspect of life is polarized now, and people don't have patience. They're not willing to agree to disagree anymore. It's my way or the highway. And I thought that with technology would have been the opposite.
Yes, and I think this is you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a very good point to make. I was very optimistic 10, 15, 20 years ago that we were heading to a point where so many people were on the same page, connected together, looking for the same things in life. Peace being one of those key things, reasonably good health, a bit of fun, all of those things. We seem to have got a lot of that, but also factions have developed, and there were always factions. There were always arguments around the world that have been going on for decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years, perhaps. But now there is some real hatred out there. And even if I just look at the UK, for example, we are very, very polarized now with the changing government. We've traditionally had more than two parties, but we really have got one party and everybody else. And everybody else is now fighting to try and decide whether they're going to stand up and be the other party in the future. The US has essentially two parties. It's always seemed a bit strange, but those two parties always seemed to be historically going in the same direction. In Europe, we would have two or three parties, lots more coalitions, more proportional representation. And from the UK, we'd look at Europe and we'd say, well, they don't get things done quite like we do because they've got more people voting in different ways, PR, proportional representation, etc. And I think we in the UK always felt we were really good. We had a party on the left and a party on the right. Now, both of those groupings are now so wide, there's just no middle ground. There's so much hatred between those two opposing forces. And it's very bad for younger people to see that. And what hope is there if they're seeing that? These adults in parliaments squabbling.
Yeah.
It's not right. It's really not right. And then we talked at the very beginning about wars and upheavals and things going on around the world. And there are a lot of them. I just don't understand it.
It's like, for example, the war in Europe. Like, when that got started in 2022, I was astonished that like the European, for me, Europe is the most advanced region in the world because of age and experience. Exactly what we're talking about, hiring older people. And you would have thought that they would have learned by now how to coexist in such a small piece of land.
Yeah. It's I think it's like there are quite a few cultures around the world that have got a lot of history. They've had a lot of fighting in the past. They've been in world wars, etc. And for the most part, come out of that with a new view, world peace, a leveling off. And yet, in Europe, we seem to have been blindsided as and this has happened. I mean, I was looking at the map actually yesterday of Europe and just reminding myself just how close to where I am all of this is, and how unbelievable that I've been working with people from Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Russia, for decades now, Poland, and we all get on absolutely perfectly okay. We never actually go very far down a political discussion, but we're all pretty much glad that world wars are something from the 20th century. And then for this 21st century war to suddenly start, and for there to be no real attempt at the very beginning for a political settlement, is astonishing to lots of people. And I actually feel very sorry for individual people in Russia, in the same way that I feel sorry for individual people in Ukraine. They have no choice in the matter because their governments are asking them to defend or asking them to attack. And these average people, average Joes, and I'm in there, we just want to watch TV, have something nice to eat, maybe watch one of those movies you've got on behind you.
And not add value to the world, right? Like, how can I actually help? Because that's the modern world works. That's how free societies work. I wake up to try to add value to somebody else so I can get the value I need to coexist.
Yeah, and listen to the same music. That's the other thing I always find astounding. Is I'm all these different people I meet, we're all at some point listening to the same music or have a view on music, and it glues everything together. And then suddenly a war breaks out or some other thing happens, and then people start to begin to hate each other. But secretly, they're still playing the same music to themselves.
Yeah.
And
there's stories where Ukrainian people were so in denial that they were like, when they declared the war and everything started happening, they were still going to the bank machine to get some money out and going to supermarket. They really thought it was a lie because it was unbelievable. And so that's also begs the question: why do you think there is so many conspiracy theories behind all this? Like, who is really the deep powers that are manipulating all this stuff? Because the average people, like Ukrainians and Russians, are brothers. They are the same people.
Yeah,
they're the exact same people.
Yeah, it is so sad. And we have that. We had the same. I think the same arguments probably. Well, I know the First World War quite well. It's one of the things I spent a lot of time studying, is the First World War. I wouldn't call it's not a hobby that I like. It's an interest that I have. I wouldn't like to have anything to do with war as a hobby. But I know from my travels around Europe about the First World War, how utterly ridiculous it ends up being. And it could probably have been settled politically. The will wasn't there. And the people were probably misled by both powers, the governments. The Second World War, a very different situation, but ultimately, a lot of people, got too much power and made bad decisions and so on. But again, the little people suffered. That doesn't change. The conspiracy theory angle, I think, for a lot of us, conspiracy theories, there's always some element of truth behind the idea. But often, if somebody just makes up an idea and see, who salutes that flag or who can follow the discussion. And I think sometimes governments like the idea of a conspiracy theory because it tests the water to see just what we are prepared to accept or not. there was historically a mistrust of the ordinary people and their uprising against the crown or the parliament. It's very difficult to conceive of that happening in the UK now. Nobody has that ability to. The uprising can't be done in a physical way like it perhaps could have been done 200 or 300 years ago. That's impossible. The uprising might be people don't pay their taxes. They refuse to do things rather than fight the government. They just refuse to do things. And if you have enough people refusing to do things, you don't have enough prison spaces. Right? We've just been through that whole discussion in the UK at the back end of last year, with people being released from prison who were a danger to the public, to make space for people who were imprisoned for making comments online. I mean, it's a strange situation that we found ourselves in as a country, and unprecedented. And actually, just to try and sort of draw that bit to a close, last week we had a situation where our government, the UK government, is asking one of the big IT companies, well, Apple, to provide a backdoor to the encryption so that the UK government can decipher the content on iCloud of UK citizens. Again, I never thought I'd be alive when the UK government asked for that kind of power.
So that's breach of privacy, right? Which is one of the first. See, this is where everything gets messed up, because we are supposed to live in a free society, and we have constitutions, we have bills of rights that all they do is protect the rights of the individual in the free world, and the right to privacy is one of those. And so the governments are behaving more and more Marxist, more and more socialist than they should be, and I don't know why they are doing that, right? Same as Canada. Canada, we are, United States wants us to become the 51st state, but I don't blame the United States. You know who I blame? I blame us, because our governments have deteriorated so much, and they have grown so big, and they have so much power over the people that it became a very, very weak nation. Because when you remove the power, when you remove the protection of the civil rights of the people in a free country, everything starts to deteriorate, because you're going right against the Constitution and right against what freedom stands for. You see?
I mean, going back to the technical nature of our discussion, this idea of putting a backdoor into an encrypted bit system. It's just a government. The problem I have with this is that in the UK we have data leaks from time to time. Sometimes it's a private company, sometimes it's a public company, or it's an overseas global enterprise that leaks some data. But it's also hospitals, it's local government, it can be central government, it can be our tax authority. All of them have at some point leaked data, and the problem is that they've not stopped doing that from time to time. Our regulator for data privacy and all of the GDPR and that, if you look at their website, they're very, very proud of the work they're doing, and yet they published a few weeks ago their enforcement details for the last few years. They haven't fined a financial penalty against any company that's breached the law. In the case of public sector, that's the police force, central government, local government, and health service, those areas where there have been breaches, they have had a system in place for the last 2 or 3 years, which is they won't fine them. They'll give them words of advice, because what's the point of fining one public department? The money is already, it's taxpayers' money. Why should it be taken from one department and then to fund the enforcement environment? What it means is, of course, that people don't learn the lesson the hard way, which is they don't get punished. I mean, if you're a private company or a public company, you get fined and your reputations can suffer. Your shareholders get very, very annoyed about that. But if you're a local government or a health service, hospital group, central government, we don't expect very much from them anyway. We generally talk down, local government. We generally talk down central government. We don't like to pay taxes, and our health service. While I think the UK has a really good health service, it does come in for some criticism, a lot of criticism actually, from people in the UK. It might be viewed by other people around the world as being absolutely brilliant from some sectors of the world, absolutely appalling from others. Most people in the UK rely on the health service at some point in their lives, and they are very, very pleased that at the point where they require healthcare, they don't have to pay. It's assumed it's paid out of general taxation. And that means that if you've experienced private care, or you've been told by your friends in another country that they didn't have to wait 4 weeks for a diagnosis for lung cancer, they was given the diagnosis within a few days. But in the UK, it might be 8 weeks or 12 weeks. We see our system as being poor. And then when they leak data, well, then you don't want them to pay £1 million in fines, because that instantly means they've got £1 million less to pay on surgery and nurses. So I understand the logic of the financial, but it means that hospitals and the public sector don't actually get any better at protecting data. And so this thing about trying to break the encryption system and the technology, we have members of our parliament who have absolutely no idea of the ramification of that. They seem to think that it's just a key that you can open a door with and only the government will get in and out. I think almost every back door has been hacked at some point. And I would not want to trust our government, or any government for that matter, with my information. And I think people like companies like Apple have come up with a very good system that protects your privacy. If you put all the things on, we have to assume that there isn't a back door ultimately. And I think people have done a lot of work on testing for back doors on these systems. So I would rely on it at this juncture. I don't want our government doing that. I accept that the arguments about quantum computing in the future might crack all of that stuff, but frankly, that's for another day, quantum computing.
Adrian, it's supposed to be a 45-minute podcast. It's been more than 50 minutes, and I really want to. I don't want to abuse your time. Thank you so much for being in the show. Are you on LinkedIn if people like to follow you or ask you some questions? Because I know you have a brilliant mind, and we touched beautiful things that I never thought we would be talking about this. But this is why this podcast is so great, because we are actually touching about life matters from the technology perspective that actually affects every people's lives.
Well, I've seen quite a lot of your the videos you put on YouTube with some of the other guests that you've had, and all of those have been very, very insightful and very nuanced in different ways. So I'm not hearing the same old thing all the time. I'm hearing different, and to me, every day is a school day. So if anybody wants to reach out after this, I'm on LinkedIn, Adrian Smith. I actually have one of those cherished URLs with LinkedIn. I'm known as Lord Oddsocks. LORDODDSOCKS. It's because I always wear odd socks. I can't really show you that for the camera, but I have odd. So LinkedIn / and then Lord Oddsocks will find me. Very happy to connect with anybody, have a discussion with them. Obviously, I'd like to come back and talk to you again at some point. And if you're in the UK, you must let us know and we can get together. And that's true of any of your viewers. If they're coming over to the UK or already here, let me know on LinkedIn. If I'm in the City of London that day or come into the office, free Wi-Fi and good coffee.
Wonderful. Adrian, thank you so much. It will be a pleasure to do a second episode of this. I think we didn't touch too much about your own experience and leadership style. So if you're willing, let's book a direct and keep the conversation going.
I've enjoyed it, David. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Adrian. God bless you. Have a beautiful week.
And you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.